Okay. We good to go? You ready to go? Right, okay, so I'm going to just talk about a few different things this morning. So last week I started the sort of beginner's oils project, which, as I say, can be any of the different kinds of oils. Can be the traditional oils, water mixable oils, or if you wanted to use acrylics, you can use acrylics and just use the same sort of approach. So I'll push this on a tiny bit in a minute. I'm going to talk very briefly about colour, and then I'll go into that a little bit more next session. Also, I want to talk about different painting surfaces, so that, you know, the options you've got of what you can paint on with oils, acrylics. The other thing I just sort of mention is one or two people had said that they'd had like scam emails coming through that are purporting to be from me. So I did put in the last email out just to be aware of that and just be careful what you open and what you click on. My emails will always come from my email address. So if I get anything through that seems a bit dodgy, I always just check the address it's come from. And if it doesn't look like mine, which it should be paulorcott43 at yahoo.co.uk. If it isn't from that, then it's going to be a scam. So just be a bit aware. And what happened was last year, I think my email got hacked, and I have changed my password a couple of times since then. It may have been hacked again, or it might be that whoever hacked it and got in my address book and got pinched over his addresses is just putting out another round of emails. So it's happened to one or two people, but not everybody, but just be a little bit aware. Okay, so has anybody lost a red umbrella? This was from last year, okay, that can go. I'll ask the afternoon group. So different surfaces you can paint on. Okay, so there's the ready-made surfaces that you can buy from the art shops. So you can get these little canvas boards. This is a fairly cheap one. And yeah, these come ready, ready primed, ready to paint, all good to go. It's basically cardboard with a little bit of cloth, cotton cloth stretched over the top to give you a bit of texture. These are fine. Sometimes I find the texture a little bit too rough. Sometimes you can benefit from a little bit of priming. Or you can get the ready-made canvases, and these vary in quality. The ones with the very thin stretchers are a little bit, perhaps a little bit cheap. So you can get sort of quite thin canvas, quite thick canvas. So the more you pay, the better you're going to get generally. So that's that. You can get more expensive canvas boards. So this one, I think, I've got some for sale here that are about, I think this one is about £1.50. So these are fairly cheap and cheerful. Something like this is a bit more expensive. It's a much finer cotton, and I think this is probably £4 or £5 for a little board like that. I got this from Jackson's. I think it's MDF board, so it's a little bit stronger board. It's a bit of wood rather than a bit of cardboard it's on, and a finer cotton. So that's a nice one.
In the works, those cheap ones, that you get 3 boards for £4, I think it is.
Yeah, so it's pretty cheap, isn't it? I mean, that's fine. As I say, these, if anybody wants any of these, I've got 2 there that are £1.50. These little ones, I think 90p. So they're A4, right? I started getting those in a few years ago because one or two of my students, once the art shop closed, had trouble getting boards to paint on and things like that. So it's my slightly older, students that didn't travel very far. So there's those if anybody wants to those. The other option is just any kind of bits of wood you've got lying around, really. If you happen to have any bits of lying around, or cardboard even. So I think that is a very thin piece of MDF from a picture framing shop. That's the back of the kitchen cupboard. Hardboard is fine if you've got any hardboard. So you get this sort of texture. I tend to paint on the smooth side, but with things like this, you're going to need to prime them yourselves. So any bits of wood, a bit of emulsion paint, matte emulsion is good, or acrylic primer. Or you can buy from the art shops, you can buy gesso primer, which is really acrylic primer with a tiny bit of texture. Anything like that. I buy MDF board. The other option is just get the canvas. You can get pads of canvas, or this is from a canvas roll that I brought in last week, if anybody wants a bit of that. And I sometimes just paint straight onto this and then make up a structure later on, if it's any good. The advantage of that is you can keep it quite lightweight. So when I went to Scotland last year, I just took some bits of canvas and stuck them to foam board, because they're really light then. So for travelling, that was really a nice lightweight way of carrying stuff. So that worked quite well. Or just things like, this is just a bit of mount board, so just cardboard. And the only thing with that is you've got to be careful, the corners will dent easily. It's a bit softer than wood, but that is fine. Sometimes picture framing shops sell the inside bits of mounts, they sell them off cheap, because once they've cut them out, they've got a bit of cardboard in the middle they can't do anything with. So again, they're fine with little bits of acrylic oils, that sort of thing. If you're working in acrylics, you can paint straight onto the card. With oils, it's best to just prime it, again with a bit of emulsion or acrylic primer. So just thought I'd just show you some of the range of surfaces. Maybe another session on going to how I prepare mine.
Years ago, we bought an oil painting. I mean, this was years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
And it was on the back of the door.
Yeah. Back of the door is probably all right, yeah.
It's got money.
Yeah, what, flat door or panel?
Oh, I don't know.
It's just a flat, yeah.
It said on door.
Yeah, you could do. I mean, the flat doors
It
you
was
get,
Danish painter. I got
Yeah.
his name.
flat doors are quite often just thin plywood,
Mm.
so that would be all right.
Yeah.
Plywood's fine, paint on that, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, anything else really, particularly when you're starting out, I think it's best to have lots of surfaces to be able to experiment on. So maybe some nice canvases and canvas boards, but maybe some scraps of backs of cereal packets and things like that, because you can just try things out then. You've got somewhere to do little oil studies. So I say this was just roll of canvas last week. So that's that. In terms of colours, most of the sets of paints that you buy will have these anyway, and I noticed Diane's set, that's got all of the colours. So if you've got a set of about 10 or 12 paints, the likelihood is that it's going to have the most common paints that you're going to need. So the sort of colours I would advise to get is a couple of yellows, a couple of blues and a couple of reds. And with those, you can mix most of the colours you're going to need. So a slightly orangey red, a slightly purpley red, a slightly greeny blue, and a slightly purpley blue, a slightly greeny yellow, and a slightly orangey yellow. And that will, you've got a great range to mix from with that. And that's pretty, I always would have those on my palette, pretty much. Maybe not, maybe just one yellow or perhaps a different yellow, but I usually have at least a couple of each of the colours out there. I've noticed some people mixing, they'll just think, oh, it's a blue sky, so I'll get a bit of blue out and a bit of white. But it just doesn't give you the range of colours you need to mix naturalistic colours. It's all right if you want a sort of a poster look, but yeah, to mix naturalistic colours, you're going to need quite a few colours to mix. So that's that. I'll go into colour mixing a little bit more next week, but you can, once you've got those, it's quite a good idea to make some colour charts. So this is like all the different purples you can make using a purpley red and a purpley blue. And then if you use the orangey red and the greeny blue, again, you get this sort of mix of colours, but instead of going purple, from red to blue going purple, it goes a bit more like brown, really. So depending on which colours you're using, you'll get different mixes. So again, I'll talk a bit about that in a bit more depth another week. So that's that. And then I was thinking what I demonstrated last week was really underpainted, tonal painting. So using either that image, I think I used that in my afternoon class, and this was the little still life I used in the morning class. So the idea is just to sort of sketch out what you want to paint. So it's one way of doing some drawing, but also you've got an idea of the balance of tones in each area. And I was fairly happy with that. Perhaps it wants to go a tiny bit darker here, but it's enough to be able to then get started as a painting. So I think what I'll do now is perhaps just move this on a little bit, or one or the other of them. At the moment, I've got my water mixable paints out because I just ended up running out of time and the others weren't out. So these were out already. The other thing is, with pallets, sometimes the plastic box is quite a good way of carrying paint around if you wanted to keep the paint for another session. So if you've got any kind of plastic box, these are A4 sized boxes from a stationery shop, and I think they're intended for keeping paper in. So these make quite a good palette or way of keeping the paint, and then I can always use a disposable palette, which I had somewhere. Get one of these disposable palettes to do the mixing on. So that works quite well. The other thing I was going to mention was carrying oil paintings home. And one method is to put some matchsticks on the backs of the board. So what I would do, I have these already somewhere. Here we go. So these paintings I did in Scotland, these were a little bit wet when I was carrying them home. So what I did was I had another board, and I've stuck like skewers, or it could be matchsticks. If you just stick something around the edge, and then you can pop that like that. And then just stick a little bit of masking tape around the edge, keep it in place, and then pop that in a plastic bag, and that's a good way of carrying wet paintings home there. So just have a board or something else the same shape and size, or at least the same width as your painting, and then you've got then a way of protecting your paintings carrying them home. That's the easiest method I've found. Or if you haven't gone to the trouble of sticking bits around, you know, have a spare board and just put a couple of pencils or something like that, just something to space it off, and then stick it down, either clips or masking tape. Lots of, again, I've used that method myself, and lots of my friends use that. Lots of my friends have paid me. Right, okay, so something like this, what I would then do next is really, I tend to work background to foreground, and that's a very traditional way of building up painting. And I wanted to show you this method of doing the underpainting first and then colour, and working background to foreground, because that's kind of the way I was taught, and it is a very traditional way. It's not the only way to paint, but it's quite a good one to learn. So this colour here, I'm thinking probably a little bit of white. So I'm going for this, really the table colour here, and a little bit of yellow. So I'm using the cadmium yellow, some white. I'm just going to try and stick with the colours that I've suggested you to use so far. So that's probably a little bit too bright, really. So I'm thinking, well, I'll need to tone that down, maybe a tiny bit of red, and maybe just the tiniest bit of blue. Sorry, this paint has been here a couple of weeks, it's starting to dry out. Might have been here since Christmas, to be honest, or before Christmas. Right, a bit more yellow. So you can see, you know, start with the yellow and then just keep adjusting. What you'll find is, going back to the colour wheel, so what I'm going for is a kind of yellow, but I don't want it too bright. So if I want to tone something down, desaturate the colour, if you use the colour opposite on the colour wheel, so in this case it's purple, so hence red and blue will make purple, and I'm adding it to the yellow to make it less intense. And it's a really good idea. If you're new to painting, new to colour mixing, just stick to the primary colours for the time being, and maybe we'll add a bit of brown in as well. But mostly try and mix with the primary colours and see how much you can create with just those. You'll learn an awful lot more about colour mixing just doing that. Right, so I'm just doing that a tiny bit, and paint's a tiny bit too thick. So as I say, I've got water mixable today, but you could use traditional oil paints, it doesn't really matter. Let me just try that out. I think that's right, maybe a little bit lighter, it's quite difficult to tell. Yeah, I think I'll go with that for the time being. Just work that into the canvas a little bit. One really good idea is to sort of squint at your subject, just really screw up your eyes, particularly with things like still life, and that helps to sort of judge the tone. Right, so try that, and then kind of working forwards, let's put a little bit more of that down there. So the next bit would be to try and get the colour of the vinegar fossil, which again is a kind of yellowy brown. So I'll start with the yellow, which is the lightest colour, and then to make that slightly browny colour, a little bit of the reds, really the same sort of colours I've just used really, and a tiny bit of blue. I think it's a little bit more red in it than I've got. Blue. And just try and get that as close as I can. I think that's probably about as good as I can get. Hopefully I've already got something a bit like the tone that I want there. So just kind of working that in. Might go a little, perhaps that'd be quite good for there, but actually on that side it's a little bit darker. So I'm going to try and make that a little bit darker, with a bit more red and a bit more blue to mix. Darken that down a little bit there. That's a bit more. That's more like the tone that I'm seeing. And generally I like to go from the darker tones and then gradually work lighter. So, you know, if this possibly could go a tiny bit darker in the background, but it's not too far out. And then I'd basically gradually work my way forward, you know, a little bit of the pomegranate, then perhaps the beetroot, the shadows. And again, the same sort of thing with this landscape. I'd go for perhaps the sky colour first, get some sky in here, and then gradually work forward these hedges in the background, then maybe the reeds here, and perhaps these hedges here, and just gradually work my way forward. I could actually, while I was doing the sky, maybe do the same, some of the puddle, because the puddle is pretty similar colour to the sky. Is that okay? Enough? Enough to get you started? Okay, right.